which make India more of a Hindu state. These are strategies which polarize the society and create Hindu and Muslim vote banks. I'll stop with that.
Thank you so much, Muqtedar. Thanks so much for that really, well thought out and rather insightful tour of the entire set of issues that that the political structure, the political economy is looking at today. I mean, it's always wonderful to listen to everything you say. There is a freshness and a depth that comes with the kind of responsibility that you take when you make those statements, despite the fact that some of them might appear to be considerably provocative. Um, and so I would just like to bring everybody into this conversation. My own broad comment. I'm not any expert on these issues, but my own broad comment is that yes, I do think that the election strategies are going to bring in the caste issue in the Muslim among the Muslims into the electoral front. But my sense is that they're getting a little pushback on that issue, because what's happening is that the more people at the top push the Pasmanda issue, the more it is highlighting the caste differences among the non-Muslims. And that is something that the Prime Minister is wary of. And the reason I'm saying this is because that seems to be a big reason why we have done something we've never done in the last 150 years, which is that in 2021 we backed out from doing a census. It's the first time in 150 years that India has no data. When we are looking at poverty in India, we don't know how much poverty exists today. We don't know how many houses are electrified. There is no data because we did not do a 2021 census. And the reason was that everybody was expecting that if you do the census, then the pressure was to do a caste census, and Modi does not want that. We don't have a census even till date, and there doesn't seem to be any hurry in getting a census done. Note that we've had census when we had China fighting with us. We had the census when we were battling Pakistan, Bangladesh, drought, Kashmir, all of that. And this 2021, there was this veneer of COVID, but that didn't stop us from hosting Donald Trump, from doing various Kumbh Melas, from doing 5 elections in states. So there was no reason for not doing that. So I think that caste bit is going to bite both ways, and therefore I'm not sure. It did look like the party was going to run away with the Pasmanda issue, and then over the last couple of months it has gone quiet on that issue. That's just one thing. I don't know if what I'm saying is right or not. The other point that I want to make is that is a little more point on the data. You see, uh, the rising tide, as you said, did manage to bring the Muslims up also, right? As India went in from the 3.5% Hindu growth rate to the 5.5 plus growth rate in the 90s and the decades afterwards, everybody rose. And certainly so did the Muslims. But the gulf is now enormous. And if you see the latest data that comes from the National Sample Survey and the Periodic Labor Force Survey, the gap between simply the labor force, if you see, the gap between Muslim wages and non-Muslim wages is just going on, becoming increasingly higher year after year, and it's enormous. I mean, just to give you a sense, the non-Muslim wage is 15,300 rupees. Where this is the non-Muslim non-skilled manual labor wage would be 15,300, while the Muslim wage would be 10,000. So the wage differential is huge, and I'm talking about non-skilled labor. So there is no endowment, there is no asset, there is no skill involved. It's exactly apples versus apples. So that, and it has risen dramatically in the last 8 years. It's 2014 onwards that the wage differential is enormous, particularly in urban India. So there is some evidence to that which makes the Muslim feel a little more vulnerable and a little more victimized in the purely economic sphere. The final point on the secular, you see, while it is true that the constitution still says India is a secular country, but the kind of uh, what should I say, the kind of derision that is being spewed on the word secular itself from the prime minister downwards, deliberately misspelling it and and making it a slur almost, is definitely something that needs to be noted, because it comes all the way from the prime minister. It's not just a few media people who are making it up, and for the last 10 years. So that's all. I just had these three broad comments, but I'd like to bring in others so you can just address all of us at once. Can I invite the others? Yes, Zainab?
Thank you so much for the presentation, sir. So I had a couple of related but separate questions. So the number one thing, I think one thing you mentioned was that when it comes to creating equal opportunity and assimilation of Muslims within a given culture, in India, what we've seen in the past is that, and this is particularly the language and messaging used by the opposition, regardless of which party is ruling, but like particularly when the Congress was ruling, was that any efforts to make India a more inclusive country for minorities was labeled as a minority appeasement, so to speak, as opposed to creating, an inclusive space, which is, one of the concerns of public policy. So there's obviously there's this behavioral problem, right? More than anything else, there is within India the endemic challenge is that the popular sentiment is usually driven by like misinformation. So, for instance, in developed countries, they would usually go by the book. So, if there's a rule or an article in the book or the constitution, then adhering to it becomes more of a social responsibility, as opposed to here, like, yes, it's there on paper, but then, in practice, there's a lot of discrepancy. So I think from your experience, of the assimilation of, American Muslims, for instance, as a minority, they have been doing, I think they've been less passive and more proactive, particularly with the rise of Islamophobia and all these things, that they have increased their representation at the higher levels in the government and in the public sphere. So, in your opinion, what are some of the low-hanging fruits for Indian Muslims? That despite the challenges, despite the currents not being in their favor, what could we do to kind of empower the community? Sorry, there are a lot of layers to my question, but please answer as per your.
No. I think it's a great one. Naushad Khan has a question. Muqtedar, could you see it on the chat? It's an interesting one, that do Indians vote differently at the state and the central level? Congress will win in Rajasthan, but all the parliamentary seats will go to BJP. So also in Madhya Pradesh, and so also in Haryana and Gujarat. So and will they do the same next year?
Let me take this
great. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So my wife is sending message saying mango cow. Okay.
Tell her humne kha liya.
So she's at work. So I think that there's sometimes people accuse Asaduddin Owaisi of being the B, RSS B or BJP B party. I think the B party is the Indian National Congress. And that's why I've been trying to invite Ahmed to talk about the book about Muslims in Rajasthan, because Rajasthan is governed by Congress, and some of the most horrible stuff recently that happened in Rajasthan, the vigilante business.
Very
right? So if even people are being lynched, the way Junaid and the other guy were burnt alive, to me is indication that Congress, and don't ever forget that Babri Masjid was also demolished with a Congress prime minister in Delhi. So the thing is that I think that the Congress in its later years, I mean, I don't remember life as it was under Nehru. I have some memories of Mrs. Gandhi and then subsequently. I think that there's a lot of overt talk about Hinduism and Hindu nationalism and Hindu Rashtra, etc. under BJP. And there was far less under Congress. But I think the policies are not very different. The parties are both parties have contributed to the marginalization and underdevelopment of Indian Muslims. So in that sense, there were the talk of Muslim appeasement was essentially a criticism of the pretense of secularism and pretense of plurality that Congress maintained. But let me also tell you about the issues that the things that Indian Muslims are fighting for and trying to defend don't exist in America, like the Muslim personal law. I feel, as a Muslim, I feel like throwing up when I look at the contents of the Muslim personal law. You're fighting to defend halala? To me, it's prostitution. There's no difference about it. Let me put it very cruelly. You take a woman to the imam and say, Imam, she's divorced. So he says, ठीक है, जोहर के बाद मैं शादी करूंगा, उसके बाद कर दूंगा, फिर असर के बाद मैं तलाक कर दूंगा, फिर मगरिब में आपकी शादी उससे फिर से कर दूंगा. What kind of Islam is this? We defended this. So there is a lot of problems and what Muslims think is Islam in India. We don't have Muslim personal law in America. I think we are free to practice Islam as much as we want. The key to fighting that is to make sure that there is religious freedom for everybody in India. So I think that Indian Muslims are also partly responsible for this appeasement. For example, after the Shah Bano case, the law that the Congress passed was a kind of appeasement for Muslims to prevent the progress and liberalization of Muslim women. So that is genuinely appeasement, and those appeasement were things which hurt the development of Indian Muslims in the progress. So that is one thing. The low-hanging fruit is something very easy in India, which is economic and educational development. You know, Modi talks about madrasas with computers. Call his bluff. When say, we have the madrasa, give us the computers. Right? If he says that we have, he wants to see madrasas with computers, great. We have madrasas, now give us computers. That is the challenge, rather than saying, oh, we reject this idea. So it's like throwing the baby out of the bathwater. I think the Indian Muslims, even in all democracies across the world, if the religious minority is economically, shall we say, weaker than the majority community, then their rights are always trampled. Doesn't matter where you're looking. But in those democracies where religious minorities are economically and educationally empowered, like in America, like the Jewish community in America, then their rights and religious and political freedoms are better guarded. So what Indian Muslims should do, if you ask me for one goal for Indian Muslims, it is to have a higher per capita than the rest of India. That is the goal, short-term as well as long-term. Invest in education, and that is critical. The data shows that a lot of educational underachievement is not entirely because of the state, also because of Indian Muslim culture. There is no doubt in my mind that if people disagree, they can disagree, but the Muslim community needs to work hard. That's why you see so much difference between, say, Muslims in Hyderabad and Muslims in Ghaziabad in UP. If you do a contrast, you will study. People are investing in colleges and professional colleges. People are studying very hard in southern parts of India. Indian Muslims in South India are comparable to Brahmins in North India in terms of academic achievement. So those are the low-hanging fruits. As for what Amer was saying about the discourse, yes, secularists, liberal, etc., have become galis in India. I mean, people actually call me that you're a secular liberal. It's like saying Maki Banki, on Twitter. So to me, it's like if they can't say that, they will say you're a secular liberal. So it has become a gali. But if you turn around and say this is a Hinduization of the state, then they will back off and say, no, it is not. So they do not want to also say that. So what has happened is that RSS and the Hindutva, shall we say, opinion makers have, in the mind of many Indians, equated secularism with Muslim appeasement and not with secularism, right? So that is why the word secular means something else to Hindutva people. And that is a tragedy. So it has to mean that you need to have more discussions about what is secularism in order to recapture the original intent of the meaning of the word secular. And the census part is interesting. I mean, we need to talk about why this government has been hiding data on many issues, right? It's not just this data. There are lots of other data which is not available. In fact, for example, during COVID, up to a certain few months, we were getting data of the daily deaths in India statewide. And then now that data is also not available. So there's a lot of talk about digital world and et cetera, digitization, but digital data about the country is not easily available. Even employment, especially women's unemployment, which is perhaps the highest in the history of independent India currently, women's employment, and we don't have accurate data on that. As for the state and national voting patterns, there are two explanations for it. One is that if you look at the nationalist Hindu, there are two wings to the nationalist Hindu. There is one which is pro-Hindutva. So they are RSS. They will argue with you and say RSS is a good organization. And then there are those who are very strongly nationalist, but they're not Hindutva. Like India mein G20 ho raha hai. They are thrilled to death. India's IPL is great. They're proud of it. In fact, all of Indians should be like that. But if you look at these Indians who are very nationalistic, the second part, people who are proud of all India's achievement, the fifth biggest economy, Indians are now governing. So all of these people have been convinced that part of it is because of Modi. So while the people in the country who are pro-RSS and Hindutva is less, I think Modi is more popular than Hindutva ideology in India. And therefore, there are people who are voting for Modi nationally who would not vote for Hindutva and RSS. And that is why you see this disparity in voting. Modi was not on the ballot in Karnataka, even though he did campaign, and like in Gujarat, where people say Gujarat, they won only because of Modi, and they are reluctant to say they lost Karnataka because of Modi. They lost Karnataka, but the first chief minister, BJP chief minister, Bommaya, whatever his name was, because of his corruption, Mr. 40%, he was Mr. 40%. So I have a feeling that there is why that disparity where BJP in 2018 did not get a majority in Karnataka and then completely swept the Lok Sabha seats. It got 28 seats in the state, I think. So it is quite possible that BJP might still win Karnataka in 2024 because then the people are now voting for Modi, and they are much more happier with the prestige and attention that India is getting internationally, and 100 unicorns, etc. So there is a lot of achievements that India has achieved in the past few years, which are attributed to the government.
Yeah, thanks so much, Muqtedar, Victor Ghalib talks about the Muslim, what is it called, Muslim Swayam Sevak Sangh, and whether that has any role to play. Zainab points out to how secularism in France is different. Yeah, so there are these issues. The RSS has some kind of a Muslim outreach, and there is that discussion going on within the Muslim community in India, whether it should reciprocate these overtures that the RSS is making, or just spurn them and just completely deny them. It's an ongoing debate. It's a tough one. Some of us are very clear that we will have no truck with the RSS unless it stops these calls for genocide, because that's what is clearly going on. Um, so yes, I think that this has been a wonderful discussion.
There are two more questions.
You agree, but Ismail and Zain have two questions. Let's take those. Yes, Ismail.
All right. Gee, can you hear me?
Of course, of course. Go ahead.
So, sorry, I was driving, so I wanted to make sure. There was a very, very important point made by Dr. Khan. BJP is one manifestation of this ideology of Hindutva. And, when we tackle BJP electorally, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have our victory. There are two parts to this question. First, how does one go about in their mind if they don't want BJP or this ideology to win? How do they go about elections, like on a local level and national level? Secondly, what do we like? Dr. Khan and I, we are from the same school, and in our school community, we see that this poison of Hindutva and anti-Muslim sentiment has gone very, very deep right now. So beyond electoral politics, also, how do we deal with this menace of people who are really close to us just suddenly becoming estranged? And is there some suggestion on how we tackle that?
Zain sir.
All right, Zain. Yes.
Yeah. My question is, the famous statement goes, if you want to understand the politics, follow the money trail.
Yeah.
And relating to Professor Muqtedar, the low-lying fruits, i.e. the economy, the finance, the money. And if I can use the example of the neighboring country, well, they were all one at one time. When Banga Bandhu, the Mujibur Rahman said that you must call East Pakistan, not East Pakistan, but East Bengal. Because when you call Punjab, when you can call Sindh, you call Baluchistan, why don't you call East Bengal? But what he was trying to bring home the point at inequality in the distribution of funds. So from Indian perspective, I want to ask, like the implementation of GST and the deferred payments of the GST funds to the non-BJP states. If you look at the Telangana state, our chief minister there always complains. Bengal chief minister always complains. So no matter how much the religion, the neighboring state has played the religion, and they have learned way earlier than us. India, I think, will also learn if they impose, well, there is no such thing as Hindutva, as you were saying. So how will the people will realize that in the name of religion, even the states are so highly discriminated? And what is the bandwidth? Like this is the first time I have seen the southern states calling themselves after the Karnataka elections, the United States of South India. So it's jokingly said, but it is out there. So what bandwidth you think of that?
Well, thank you very much. I was over the weekend, last Saturday, I was in Atlanta, and on Sunday I met Zain and Ismail and had coffee with them. They are both from Hyderabad and very active. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So thank you for joining us, and very interesting questions. So I'm going to try and combine Amir's last comment with the question that Ismail asked. I have some news for you. I think RSS is the moderate version of Hindu nationalism. And the calls for genocide are coming from what is emerging as a further right of RSS. So there is one YouTube channel called the News Laundry. I don't know whether you watch News Laundry. If you go to News Laundry, they have a 1.5 hour show talking to the guy where these calls for genocides came out from. And it was fascinating to me because these guys were pro-Yogi, Adityanath Yogi, and anti-Modi and anti-Mohan Bhagwat. In fact, that guy basically said that Mohan Bhagwat is not a religious person. Okay, he should stick to politics. He's a politician, not a religious. So he should not talk about Hinduism. He should only talk about the Rashtra. Wo Rashtrawaadi hai, Dharmwadi nahi, or something like that. He used the phrase. So to me, see, the reason why Erdogan keeps winning in Turkey is because there's no another right-wing party or Islamist-leaning party in Turkey which is right of him. So wherever he's the right. So everybody else is on his left. So the right flank of Erdogan, the right flank of Imran Khan. Imran Khan has people on his right, but they're not palatable. That's why they're not in the public forum. So what is happening now in India is you have something which is a very virulent version of Hindutva, even more virulent and even more nasty than RSS that is emerging. So even though RSS has not moved to the center, it is looking as if it is in the center because of these Dharm Sansad type of people. But what they are also doing is putting pressure on Modi to not moderate. Because if you remember, there was so much criticism of Modi for what he did to Nupur Sharma and did not stand up and defend Nupur Sharma. The criticism came from Hindutva people. So you are seeing the emergence of an even stronger, nastier version of Hindutva, which will either force RSS and BJP to move further to the right or will emerge as an alternative competition to them inside the BJP as the Adityanath Yogi version of it. It's like Donald Trump inside the Republican Party. So it's like Yogi will be the Donald Trump of the BJP, a far more nastier version. And he's also a religious person, unlike Modi and Mohan Bhagwat, he's a yogi. So I think that we are going to see a huge problem. And I have a feeling that that is where having some kind of at least a dialogue with RSS, because in order to prevent India becoming from an extremely fascist kind of state under people who are from the Dharm Sansad side, which could also lead to terrible violence in India. The second thing that I want to say is that the reason why people who were friends 10 years ago despise us today are multifold. Part of it is what has happened since 9/11. The emergence of 9/11, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Lashkar-e-Jahangir, Lashkar-e-Muhammad, the attack in Mumbai, the attack on Indian Parliament, the continuous terrorism activities, which Muslims pretend as if don't happen at all in the world. So Muslims live on a planet where these things don't exist, but the rest of the world lives on a planet where Muslims are killing people everywhere, from Paris to Mumbai. Now, under this environment, the Hindutva ideologues have successfully equated Islam with jihadism and Islam with terrorism. And when you deny this to your friend thinks you are a sympathizer of ISIS and sympathizer of Al-Qaeda and sympathizer of Jaish-e-Mohammed because you pretend as if they don't exist. And so the anger and animosity that they have towards these terrorist organizations, especially the ones that did violence in Mumbai, attacked the Indian Parliament. And if you don't acknowledge that, they'll think, well, you are a supporter of this group, and then they will treat you like they would treat Al-Qaeda. And I think that the Hindu nationalist ideologues have done a great job. Even ANI, you watch the podcast on ANI, which is supposed to be an Asian news level. It is so anti-Muslim and Islamophobic. It's shocking, the kind of discourses and the kind of people they invite on that show. And they are creating a whole way of writing India's history, talking about Muslims as invaders, as externals. And when Hindutva activists accuse Muslims of being non-Indians, Indians are also doing a lot of things. Indian Muslims are also doing a lot of things to show that they are not Indians and they are Middle Easterners. Okay? And I used to make fun of every day in the morning when you get up in Akbarbagh, where I used to live and we used to go out, we could immediately tell whose brother is working in Saudi Arabia by looking at their night suit. I used to wear kurta pajama, but my neighbor who had a brother in Jeddah used to wear a maxi or a thobe, right? He used to dress like my mother does when she goes to sleep. So we used to make fun of it as to how Islamization of Akbarbagh is leading to feminization of Muslim men. So this whole idea of identifying with a foreign culture, with foreign symbolism, these pan-Islamist cultural habits also further contribute, which your Hindu friends and your Hindu neighbors are seeing. That's why I wear this. It irritates me that Modi is trying to make this as a Modi jacket. No, this is not a Modi jacket. This is a Muslim heritage with the Ottomans used to wear many years ago, if you go and look at the Ottoman Empire. So there is a lot of this thing going on where Muslims want to be treated like Indian, but they are not doing as aggressively in owning the Indianness of Indian Muslims. They have to be aggressive in owning. So for example, we have lots of organizations in the United States which do a lot of talk about India's democracy in danger, but they never celebrate August 15 or January 26. Only Hindus seem to celebrate India's independence and India's freedom, etc. Not even flag hoisting, nothing like that. And so it is easy to see. You know, I have an Indian flag here, if you see, which says I'm an Indian American. Believe it or not, apparently it brings a lot of people in India who watch my shows to tears when they see that I've been away from India for 30 years, but I still have an Indian flag there. There are some who say he's being cynical, but the others say, no, he's willing to share his identity as an Indian. And it immediately makes us bond. So I have a feeling that one of the things that Indian Muslims have, especially for this Middle East job that thousands and thousands have gone and worked, they have renewed this foreignness of Indian Muslims. And that is going to be both an internal and an external challenge. While the external people accuse Indian Muslims of being foreign, even now, and sometimes Indian Muslims are doing things to look foreign. And I think that is a challenge. It is part. India is struggling to redefine what it means to be an Indian. So we are having a second debate in India about Indian nationalism, what kind of India we want. This debate started when India was formed, the modern, in 1940s, 47, where the RSS and BJP, RSS and Hindutva people lost the debate to Nehru and Gandhi. But now there are no Nehrus and Gandhis, but there are Modis and Bhagwats, and they are winning that debate.
So you're saying that it is not enough to just keep quiet when this talk of Muslim extremism comes. We should go outright and denounce it.
Why? What's wrong with that?
Yeah, nothing's wrong. We used to
just yesterday, one guy came and said, why don't you say this about ISIS? I said, what rubbish? Just Google ISIS fatwa. There are hundreds of Indian ulama have given a fatwa against ISIS. Why don't Hindus know about it? I have written extensively all my life, 20 years, against Al-Qaeda and ISIS as they are un-Islamic. These are not Islamic organizations. See, if you don't say that it's ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Jaish-e-Mohammed, this Hafiz Saeed, this Ghazwa-e-Hind, yes, Sartan se Juda, if you do not disown this and condemn them repeatedly and loudly and from every level of Muslims, from Owaisi onwards to this Nadwi, that Nadwi, then it will stick to you. It will stick to the Indian Muslim community. So for example, when a Jewish guy does something violent here or a white, immediately every leader in the country will come out very strongly and condemn it in no uncertain terms. So it doesn't stick to them. But Indian Muslims look as if they are liking it, but when asked, they will disown it. But otherwise, they will not. So that is to me very troublesome. Like this Jamil character from Majlis, he when Nupur Sharma thing happened, he started this Sartan Se Juda sloganeering, making videos and posts. There are only 2 videos. I don't even know from which city they are. But those 2 videos and those slogans are used to equate the extremism of all the many Hindutva gangs which are out there doing violence and so-called Muslim gangs which are threatening to cut off the heads of Hindus. So if there is no significant condemnation across the board, repeated, then it will stick. We learned this lesson as American Muslims after 9/11, where we didn't do this and we had this huge problem as we were seen as sympathetic to Al-Qaeda and later on to other forms of terrorism. So Muslims have to realize this, and especially if it's coming from Pakistan. I mean, a lot of Indian Muslims now routinely do this, but it's a bit too late. So it's taking longer time for it to have this impact. So you have to be early on these issues. And that is the challenge. Plus, we are less in number, right? There are 200 million Muslims. Even with this growth in population in 2050, which is nearly 25 plus years from now, there will be 1.3 billion Hindus and 300 million Muslims in India at the current rates. So Muslims are going to be outnumbered. So if they have to match the level of discourse, they'll have to talk more loudly, talk more effectively to be able to match the discourse that is coming from Hindu nationalists. And the next generations of Hindus are growing in a very different India, not growing up in Nehru's India, they're growing up in Modi's India. And so we are going to see even among the normal people, a lot of Hindutva embedded in their culture, in their practice, in their aspects.
Great point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Muqtedar. Thank you so much again. I missed out a couple of lines, so but I know what you're saying. That is so true. This, as some of us have been arguing, that the point is not in India. The point is not that we look at these things as Hindu or Muslim issues. It's very important for us to look at terrorism as a terror issue, as a law and order issue. Whether it is terror against the Dalit or the Muslim or the woman, it is just as bad, and whoever makes it. And whether it is a Muslim girl who gets raped or a Hindu girl, the crime is just as heinous. The Citizenship Amendment Act was against the Muslim, but it is bad for the country. So we all have to take that principled stance, and it's important for, as further says, for Muslim voices also to be heard there very effectively and very loudly. So thank you so much, everybody, for having joined us. The next session, Anjana, if you're there, the next session is Poonams, and one of the points that Muqtedar raised, which is about the populations and the demographics and how they change. Poonam and Sangamitra are possibly our most eminent demographers, and they will be talking about this entire thing of fertility and Muslims and all this stuff that, as Muqtedar said, the Yogi Brigade talks about in terms of the Muslims overtaking the rest. So it's going to be a fascinating presentation on that, and we will quickly announce the next date. It will be early morning for you, so we keep it late evening in India. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks so much, Muqtedar. Thanks, Haider Bhai, for having joined, and each one of you who was here. Hoping to see you again very soon. And thanks for being patient with that little extra time that we took today. But thank you so much. Thanks again on behalf of USIPI and CDPP. Thanks, Zamir. Thank you.
Thank you.